Hello everyone, it's Lane, and welcome to my first tutorial. On this tutorial, I'll be showing you how I start most of my drawings by using a grid. So, let's get started. First, you need to select your reference image. I was commissioned to do a drawing of James Stewart, so I'll use this image for this tutorial. In my work, I like to get a lot of detail, so I'll make sure my reference image is large enough to see all of that detail. For example, this is a side-by-side comparison of the same image with different resolutions. The one on the right has a lower resolution, which makes it more difficult to see the lines of the hair and wrinkles and the shine of the eye. Next, you want to get your image to the size you want. The tool I use a lot is Excel. Simply drag your image onto a blank Excel sheet, then you can grab a corner of your image and drag it to your desired dimension. You can then print it. For larger images, it will print on multiple sheets of paper. If you do this, cut the blank edges off, and then you can glue the pages together like a puzzle. For this picture, I printed it half the size I was going to draw it. I want to draw it 20 inches wide, so it's printed 10 inches wide. I will use a factor of 2 when enlarging my grid on the drawing. I'll start creating my grid on my reference image. I start out with the vertical lines. I make marks on the outside of the image's border. I start with inch-wide marks, but as I get into the facial portion of the image, I use half an inch wide marks. I do this because the facial features are the most important part of the portrait. This also helps with finding where you are on the grid. Once all the marks are made, I'll connect them with a line. I move on and do the horizontal lines for the grid. Make sure when you're doing this that your lines are dark enough to see on your image. The biggest squares on this grid will be 1 by 1 inches. That means for my drawing, they will be 2 by 2 inches. Now I'll move to the actual drawing. First, I create my border that is centered on the page. When the border is made, I'll make the grid for the drawing. I use the same process as I did with the reference image. This time I will have 2 and 1 inch markers. You copy the same amount of marks as you did on the reference image. Once they're done, you can connect them with your line. Make sure when you're doing this that your lines are drawn lightly. I usually use an HB pencil, that way I'm not pressing too hard on the paper to get my line. When the horizontal and vertical lines are made, we can start on the drawing. First, find a starting point on the grid. For this tutorial, I'll start on the nose. Double check that you start on the right square. If you don't, it can be very bad and your whole drawing will be shifted. I'll start on this square for the nose. The nose almost intersects the top left corner of the square at the red point. It also crosses close to halfway on the right edge of the square. I'll draw this curve in the square. Then I'll continue on to the nostril and then continue drawing the rest of the main lines for the nose. Once I've lightly done all the main lines in an area, I'll continue on and add a few of the important highlights and shadows. Now I go and finish the rest of the drawing. The reason I keep a paper on the top of my drawing is to prevent my hand from smudging. That is also why I work left to right. Since I'm right-handed, I don't want to smudge what I've already drawn. Depending on what you're drawing will help you decide how detailed you get with your sketch. For landscapes, I get less detailed in my sketch, because if I'm a little off with my lines, it won't be as noticeable as it is with the lines on a portrait. Once I've completed all of my lines, I'll erase the grid lines neatly, and now I can begin shading and creating my portrait. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave your questions or comments below. If you have any suggestions on how I can improve my tutorials or a different tutorial I can do, feel free to leave those as well. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos. Thanks.